his competitors' products. So well noted. Thank you, Ramez. So Ramez is in Beirut, yes, or am I? Thank you. So that's another another challenge you might be facing, and has had a very untraditional background in getting to Facebook. And he's very excited to talk to us about it all. His time at Booz, yes, am I getting that right? And joined Facebook how many years ago? 2 years ago, at a very pivotal time in the industry. There you go. This is one way to do Zoom webinars. So I've known Ramez for several years, and he's always been very supportive of the VC and startup ecosystem and working with founders across the board. And I think that part of this discussion, when he gets his audio to work, which will probably be something very simple once we figure it out, will be around where the opportunities are for founders across the region as they try to scale tech businesses, where he sees the different challenges and opportunities coming in as the head of Facebook. Do we have it working? I still can't hear you. my bet is that your volume's on low. No? It's funny because you can hear us, but we can't hear you. So I'm going to run out of yes and no questions in a few minutes, but I know that there's about 50 people on the line. If anybody has a yes or no question to ask Ramez, now is a fantastic time to pose them. And wait, he's dropped again. So maybe next time he logs on, it'll actually work. Let's give him a few minutes. I think we can hear you. Do you want to try saying something? Yes! Yay!
Oh, amazing.
We do like a virtual high five. Isn't that
wow.
cool?
I don't work for a tech firm or anything like that.
No, no.
Like, you know.
Not at all. Not at all.
Wow,
It's not in the slightest bit embarrassing for you.
Amazing.
But
amazing.
that's okay. How are you? All good?
I had to go in, I had to code a solution, you know, it was very sophisticated.
I'm sure you did. Or just restart computer. Isn't that we're all taught to do that many, many years ago? Things don't work, just restart. So let's start with many, many years ago. So maybe share with us in a couple of minutes kind of your background, your trajectory, how it's always been your childhood dream to be the CEO of Facebook MENA, and how you got here.
Yeah, no worries. Well, listen, first and foremost, Noor, it's so wonderful to see you. It's been a while, and really delighted to be having this discussion, this conversation. And hello to everyone, wherever you may be. Last time I was at a TechWadi gathering, it was at Berkeley, and that was absolutely wonderful, and really, really enjoyed it. So hello from Baghdad, which is just outside of Beirut, up in the mountains, about a kilometer up, and surrounded by what is remaining as beautiful in Lebanon these difficult days. My story is that my story, I suppose, in tech started many years ago when I, in fact, got started, in fact, during my graduate studies at the University of Toronto. I had decided that that engineering, the form of engineering that I had studied, mechanical engineering, and my foray into oil and gas was not my calling in life, that I needed more of the business side of things. And so what did I decide to do? I decided to go get a PhD in industrial engineering because somehow that was more business oriented. And off I went to U of T, started a program there, and then found that a PhD program was terribly solitary and that I needed to be around people and engage people. And a few friends started to apply and start working in strategy consulting firms. And I told them, I said, you know, what is the strategy consulting all about? And they said, nothing really. I said, what do you mean? They said, hey, you just have to kind of be a little bit smart. I said, I think I can do that. And so I applied and ended up working for a company called A.T. Kearney. I think today it's now just known as Kearney, but at the time it was A.T. Kearney. And I started off in their strategic IT practice, basically figuring out how tech can facilitate, you know, a business agenda. And it really piqued my interest, piqued my curiosity, and I spent time in it. And lo and behold, a year or two into that experience, a dot-com phenomenon began out in the Bay Area, and very soon was consumed by what Greenspan very eloquently called irrational exuberance. And so we got into that paradigm wholeheartedly. And I was a part of a whole group of A.T. Kearney folks who essentially got the support of EDS, another big tech company, who gave us a very large sum of money to go out and essentially do what A.T. Kearney used to do in the physical world, but online. Strategic sourcing, supplier identification, auctions, and the like. And so we went out and built a fantastic platform. I was the head of engineering and product development at the time, and had a team in Bangalore and a team out in the near Oakland, in essence, and we started to build this platform, and eventually opened up 3 or 4 offices in the U.S., 1 in Europe, and it became a resounding success. And in the course of a year and a half, Noor, we had essentially created a force to measure with. We were up against companies like Free Markets and Commerce One and Ariba at the time. And Morgan Stanley gets excited, says, hey, wow, you guys are really onto something out here. We'd be delighted to underwrite the business. And so we filed the S1, had a valuation at the time of something close to $1 billion. And, you know, we were riding high. We were thinking, this is it, man. We've made it. and with a valuation of $1 billion, we were convinced that the IPO was just going to be amazing. Now, right before it IPO'd, something happened. The bubble burst. I have a particular view as to what caused it to burst, which I think will make for another discussion another time. But we were told not to IPO the business. Then we were told to try to sell the business. And we tried to sell for $1 billion, 500, 100, 50, 20, nothing. So we decided to keep the lights on, and the company continued, and it still survives until today. Company at the time was called Abbreviate. Today it's part of something much larger called A.T. Kearney Procurement Solutions. In any case, I decided at the time to go back into consulting. I joined a company called Booz Hamilton. There were around 30 of us in the Middle East at the time. I joined them in the Middle East, living and operating out of Beirut. All of our projects were in Saudi Arabia. And we grew that business from 30 people to 500 people. And it really, you know, defined the consulting industry. You had the chance to be a part of that story at one point as well. And we did that up until we came to the point of splitting off from Booz Allen Hamilton, and we created another consulting firm called Booz and Company. And in Booz and Company, I became the head of the digital practice of the company in the region. I helped create something called Booz Digital globally, and led that globally. And it was the first time that we took strategy consulting and married it with engineering and product design and marketing and user experience. And so we created a very powerful troika of the bottom line, the strategic intent, engineering, and the consumer. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And then we ended up selling Booz and Company. And I went from being the global head of Booz Digital to becoming the managing director of Booz Allen Hamilton, as I returned to Booz Allen Hamilton. And I led the business in MENA and the international markets, and did that for several years. And a couple of years ago, joined Facebook. So abridged version of how I got here.
So thank you for that. And I think the question that most people want to ask, and I'll take a moment to pause here. If anybody does have questions, please post them in the chat group. We'll try to take them all, and feel free to post them anytime. But I would reckon the question as why? Why leave Booz? And you've been there forever. I don't want to say you're part of the furniture, but effectively you're part of the furniture over there, right?
Yeah,
like you built it. It's your organization as much as anybody else's. And then all of a sudden you take a decision to walk into what is in effect the beginning of a very, very long storm in an industry that is well loved and well hated at the same time. Yes. So what made you make that move, and what was your thought process? And as being as frank as you can be, how long did you lose sleep over that decision?
Look, it's a great question, Noor. And let me be clear. I think Booz Allen Hamilton is a wonderful organization. It is one of the oldest consulting firms in the world. It continues to be compelling to many, many clients globally. And it's really good at what it does. And for my story is less about walking away from something and rather walking towards something. I as I said to you, kind of my first foray into IT, if you want, when I joined the strategic IT practice at A.T. Kearney many, many years ago, piqued my interest. I caught the bug. I went to California. I started a business. I was very much intrigued by the digital world and the ability to be an actor in it. And in consulting, so much of one's experience is at the sideline. You are sort of on the hillside pontificating. I think you should do this, and I think you should do that. And whether you do it or not, that's entirely someone else's problem. Now, of course, many firms will really roll up their sleeves and get into problem solving and implementation. But it's different to be the producer of something, the developer of something, to drive its agenda and to realize its impact, with the constituents directly. And so when I was approached by Facebook, their question to me, or the way they kind of attracted me, was through a series of points. And the points were essentially, look, Ramez, we realize you're not an advertising guy. You're not a marketing guy. You're not a sales guy, but you know the boardroom. You know the C-suite. You understand heads of states and cabinets. Help us to evolve Facebook and the way that we're going to market to be compelling beyond the traditional attention given, very importantly, to the CMO. How do we become relevant to the C-suite, the boardroom, the cabinets, the heads of state? And I thought, okay, that's a really interesting question. Aren't you just a marketing kind of advertising platform? Isn't 90-some% of your revenue coming from advertising? And I spent some time thinking about this, and I discovered that this portfolio of products that are constantly evolving, constantly becoming relevant to more and more consumers, people, institutions, businesses, can fundamentally evolve a commercial equation. It can help generate revenue. It can help reduce cost. It can help engagement with value chains internally and externally, well beyond marketing. And I thought, wow, here's a chance to do something at a much bigger scale. So consulting, you will work for a client or a business unit within a client. Heck, you might even work for a government or maybe even a sector. But here, I had the chance to work for an entire region. I had the chance to make a difference for a region, and that piqued my interest. And so that's something I walk towards. And I can tell you unequivocally that every night, every day, I've had the experience of thinking, "What the hell have I done? What am I doing here?" But that's also very much met with the satisfaction and joy of feeling like I've made a difference to a heck of a lot of people.
So how have you made a difference? And how do you see the opportunity of I'm going to change people's lives as Facebook?
Well, yes and no. So when I came in and kind of what I saw from the outset, and I confirmed it once I was inside, is that our region, the MENA region, is home to tens of millions of micro, small, medium, and large enterprises, north of 40 million by my count, by our count. But the percentage of businesses that are plugged into and engaged in any sort of digital economy is abysmally low. It's less than 0.5% of 40+ million entities that exist. Only about 175,000 of them are engaged in any kind of online commercial transactions. And so I looked at this and said, hey, wow, exactly. How do we get businesses to plug in to a global economy? How do we get them to have access to audiences? How do we get them to be digitally equipped and enabled? So skills development, infrastructure. Facebook can do all of these things. We build infrastructure, we extend network coverage, we provide training and tooling, we give free services to get people to figure out how to move their businesses from bricks to clicks, from mom and pop shops to something that can employ 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 100 people. And to me, that felt like the opportunity to be a doer of good. I thought that was incredibly exciting. Now, part of it obviously is to also help the big companies and big institutions get better and better at what they do, e-commerce, at scale for, mega conglomerates and the like. But the really exciting part for me is the ability to touch the people that need it the most. And you know what? This part of the world needs to be, and I think everyone, the TechWadi audience, the people that are participating in it I think we are all part of the solution. We're part of this region being a source of good news, as opposed to the news that's dominated headlines for decades. And we can have a debate as to, is it us? Is it someone else? Is it a conspiracy? Is it not? That's not the point. The point is, we have the opportunity to be a source of great news. And it stands on some basic facts. If people have a roof over their head, food in the belly, and a sense of the future for themselves and their families, that gives you strength. It gives you a foundation. It gives you a chance to grow. And I saw that as being much more real and palatable through this decision.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So when we take a look at the region, we have half the population under 30. You're talking about 400 million people if we just call it strict MENA. And you have 40% youth unemployment, the highest in the world, along with sub-Saharan Africa. We have, been kind of heralding entrepreneurship as a solution to this big problem for the last 5 or 6 years. And in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen governments come fully supportive of that in terms of capital regulation and enabling VCs and entrepreneurs to kind of get the ball rolling. We've been behind the curve on fintech and financial inclusion, largely for regulatory reasons. We're slowly catching up. And we see a few opportunities ahead. You seem very, very excited about the region, right? And you think that these entrepreneurs really have massive opportunities and they can do a lot. And you as Facebook want to enable that and help them grow. And and create the job growth and the rest of it that we all, hope that the region will bring, and the success stories and the soft power. Where are the opportunities? So we saw last year, the VC fund, we saw 1,400 deals across the region. We've invested over the last, we're in our third investment year, we've invested in 17 companies. So if you take a look at the entrepreneurs, we have our selection process. We know where we believe the opportunities are, but we're looking at it from a 10,000 foot level, like how you used to look at it at Booz, right? Which is like, we are a few steps removed. We look at opportunities on macro scale. We find entrepreneurs that are filling these and we back them. How do you see it as Facebook? Where are the opportunities from your position at Facebook? Where should entrepreneurs be focusing? Which industries? I mean, there are some very obvious post-COVID industries, but specificity would be great here. And with the key question always being, if Ramez, you were not the CEO of Facebook MENA right now, what company would you start?
Wow, that's a whole bunch of
so there's a lot of loaded questions there. I gave you 5, so you could pick 2 and or 3.
Well, let's see where a little bit of stream of consciousness leads us in response to this one. First and foremost, the way that you as a global investor look at at entrepreneurs is very different than the way Facebook will look at an entrepreneur. You have a certain lens and a filter for a return, to yourselves, to your shareholders. You're thinking about a particular scale and a particular impact and a particular growth rate that is very different than the narrative that I'm speaking to around, mass digitization of businesses. Okay, where the woman is sitting, selling fruits in Tahrir Square is being approached by us in some way to say, hey, what if you made juice instead of selling fruit? Because you can have more margin on the juice. And what if you could pre-order to know, in fact, how much juice you should make in advance so that nothing went to waste. And oh, by the way, if you had someone to deliver juice for you, you could sell a hell of a lot more. And by doing all of this, you could probably hire 1 or 2 more people. So my interest is in that. Yeah. And if I can put out an aspiration, and we did, to say we want to digitize millions of companies, 5 million companies. And if one out of each one of these 5 million, one company out of every 5, okay, could hire just 1 more person, then we could create 1 million jobs. Okay, that's our motivation. Okay, we're not looking at who's going to become a unicorn, and I mean, it'd be great if they do, because they'll spend more with Facebook ostensibly, but that's not the point. The point is we're trying to kind of spread capability and impact. So on a very basic scale, Noor, when you put on the kind of lens that I'm describing, it's really around equipping people with the skills necessary to move a business from brick to click. It's around equipping them with the financial tools and the logistics tools to be able to have traction beyond the physical radius that they once exclusively served, and that by doing all of this, wellness grows. That's the agenda. And when you're talking about that segment, this basic digitization, this basic skills gathering, there isn't necessarily hockey sticks everywhere. Okay, so it's the basic enablement of sectors, right? Now, once you have that basic enablement, clearly, when we look at the larger segments, the big businesses, the largest advertisers in the region, there are very clear indicators as to what has responded and is thriving in the context of, the digital engagement in the COVID era in which we're living, versus those that have drastically suffered. And those industries, those businesses that have been massively dependent on physical engagement, no surprise as to what they are: airlines, hospitality, much of quick service restaurants, auto, real estate. The physical world that have depended on physical world have struggled, and struggled quite dramatically, because footfall has gone away. People have been restricted; they're not moving around. While other industries have, grown massively and can barely, accommodate the surge in demand.
Yeah.
Aspects of retail and grocery business and telecoms and entertainment. Now, in this context, some very interesting things that are happening. These guys that have had the watershed, kind of, that have just had the windfall of opportunity, are figuring out how to pivot to expand their relevance. So you see telecom operators getting into financial services, getting into education, getting more and more into entertainment. It's an interesting set of new opportunities that are opening up for them. You see the guys that have struggled in their traditional model pivot to play a different game. Airlines thinking about, hey, how do I take my catering direct to consumer? Or, quick service restaurants thinking, I don't have footfall. How do I get into a game that you've often talked to me about, ghost kitchens, right? How do I use my facility to now, service other people? And so these pivots is opening up a whole new kind of set of revenue streams and implications on operating models and the like. And certainly, the real estate sector has had to figure out what its future value proposition is. How do you become relevant to people when really people can work from anywhere? What can you offer them? What are the value added services? What are the benefits? What are the tax breaks and havens that you can create, or high bandwidth connectivity that needs to be part and parcel of any kind of real estate sector that comes in? And so the opportunities are very much kind of in flux. And I think pivots is what's really enabling so much of this in across sectors. If I were to invest my own time into something, I think it would very much be in the area of getting services to work for people that have been marginalized, I would say. So let me explain what I mean by that. I think, and you've probably looked at fintech as a part of your own portfolio. With the mass shift onto online during COVID, it's great if you've got a credit card and can buy and can transact, and it kind of sucks if you don't. That the physical engagement has decreased. You can go online because our region, a lot of people are online, but you just can't do very much. And so I would probably want to play in the space, which is an enormous space of the unbanked, and getting services and financial transactions availed to unbanked populations. It's a volume game, and a volume game that ultimately I think will do a lot of good for a lot of people. And so while that might not have the immediate kind of hockey stick that a global investor such as yourself would be thinking about first and foremost, for me, I think solving payments and getting people to be included in the digital economy is something that I would derive a lot of joy and personal pleasure out of.
Right. No, I agree. I think that there's massive opportunities in fintech and kind of banking the unbanked and the underbanked, and kind of leapfrogging, right? So if you want to think forward 10 years, like my kids, your kids, none of them should ever see a bank, right? As in a physical infrastructure. That's something of the past. When you think about when you want to look forward, it's how do you go from a cash economy to a digital economy and kind of skip all of that.
We have a lot of banks that are our clients. We love them very much. We want to see them. Don't get me in trouble, Noor. Don't get me in trouble.
I'm talking about reality and just like where the world is going, whether or not we like it. Okay, I want to take some of the questions here. So as part of you being in MENA, I'm curious to know how you would compare MENA's growth to North America's in terms of growth, market share, saturation, and then which industry and or regions do you advise an early career individual to stick to? So two different questions there. But let's talk about MENA for a minute.
I didn't get the second part.
The second part is which industry and or regions do you advise an early career individual to stick to? Let's talk about MENA for a bit. It's one of these very interesting places in the world, I find, where there's a lot of problems, which means that there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of market inefficiency, which if you can tackle it, provides a good place to play.
That's right.
Is that something you agree with, you disagree with? And as you mentioned, we invest regionally. We've also invested a lot internationally. You've done both as well. Kind of how do you compare and contrast?
I wholeheartedly agree with the notion that, problems are also opportunities. And, we have our disproportionate share in many ways exacerbated by history and by COVID. Yeah. And history is not just, the series of events, it's also the series of decisions. We have a significant dependency on hydrocarbons to drive our economic engines. It's just a matter of fact. But what is encouraging is that so many of the national agendas, and if you look at Saudi Arabia's national agenda and the words of His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman around, how the kingdom is pivoting and growing and building up capabilities beyond the hydrocarbon focus. And it's true in the UAE and true in many other geographies as well. That kind of historic dependency has led us to not emphasize enough to date on a number of sectors that hold a lot of promise. And these national agendas are doing something about it. But the challenges are deep and wide. You highlighted youth unemployment, and COVID, has seen a massive decrease in FDI. It's seen all kinds of stimulus packages coming out of countries that can, not enough from others. Millions and millions of people displaced, humanitarian aid increases. I mean, it's a complicated situation, but there has to be hope. There has to be something to hold on to. And I tell you, all of you people on this call and part of these organizations, Tech Wadi and the like, you are the promise. You are the engine of the future. If you guys don't do it, who the hell is? And if we don't do it,
that's a lot of responsibility. But thanks for the vote of confidence.
No, but I mean, in a way, if we can't wait for something to kind of drop from the sky, like it's got to be built on the shoulders of those that can. And I think there are so many challenges that can be converted into opportunities, like the fintech one that we were just talking about, or like a cross-border trade. Governments are stepping in not only with financing, but they're also stepping in with regulation or deregulation, right? It's still somehow cheaper to send a kilogram from New York to Dubai than maybe from Dubai to Riyadh, right? That shouldn't be, yeah? It shouldn't take longer to go from Dubai to Riyadh than, New York, New York to Dubai as well. Like the time, the cost, the regulation, markets need to open up. We need to unlock the VoIP constraints. And with these things and with the efforts being put towards them, I think there are plenty of opportunities to pursue.
So that half answers one of the questions, which is about what are some regulatory and legislative policy reforms that you believe the private sector can participate in, which would yield lasting impacts other than part-time work shifting to skill-based employment. So in addition to what you just mentioned, or maybe specifics from there, what kind of regulatory and legislative infrastructures would you think would be most beneficial to the private sector that either the governments can enforce or that the private sector themselves can participate in?
Yeah. Look, there's a lot that I think, we have been vocal, other tech firms have been very vocal about, the consulting industry has been very vocal about, other governments have been very vocal about. In fact, there's a new book, a very good book by Amir Hijazi called Ecosystem Arabia. He had written another one that was a bestseller called Startup Arabia. He wrote another one called Ecosystem Arabia, and it touches on all of these types of opportunities to change and evolve and grow and improve across the region. But things that come top of mind are the ones that I've mentioned. We must get over this voice over IP impediment that we have in the region. We must evolve our bankruptcy laws to allow startups to rise and fall and rise again. without, without the baggage that comes with a previous bankruptcy in one's in one's resume. We must remove the cross-border impediments, whether it's time-based or cost-based. We've got to get over the very historic view around the data localization or over-regulating on what's online, one geography to the next. I mean, either the internet is universal and we come together to figure out how to manage the internet universally, or we're on the precipice of breaking up the internet and we have like a pocket by country, and that makes the value proposition of seamlessness very, very difficult. And around payments, whether it's carrier-based payments from mobile operators, or the cash to digital conversion that we were talking about before for unbanked or underbanked or financially excluded populations. I mean, all of these topics demand private sector engagement and private sector voice, because by unlocking these things, we open up a world of possibilities that are otherwise constrained.
So a lot of these.
Wait a minute. There's one other one. There's a huge one. There's a huge one, and I gotta dig this thing up and share it. In fact, it was a fellow from Aspen that had first alerted me to it. There was an analysis that was done that showed that if you combined all the demand for loans coming from small and medium enterprises, okay, across MENA, that total would somehow come to the tune of 200 to 300 billion dollars. But that these 200 to 300 billion dollars could generate somewhere between 20 to 30 million jobs. 20 to 30 million jobs. Imagine what that does if we somehow get people that are disenfranchised and angry about their predicament, and to be active, productive, contributing members of society. This card is in the hand of many, many governments. And when you look at how much perhaps we spend on defense across the region, this is, I would say, a very doable sum of money that could really make a difference in this part of the world.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. It's one of these items that's always on the agenda, but never at the top priority. Right. And I think that, I think that a large part of what we see in the region, whether it comes venture funding or even the concept of venture debt doesn't exist in the region, is, well, what if these people disappear? Back to your earlier comment on bankruptcy laws and kind of protecting your capital comes at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Facebook Shops products for the MENA region? Is it launched on the roadmap? And if so, how do you see it scaling? Seeing with Shopify's 100% revenue growth reported today, top of mind. So. Yes,
yes, and yes.
Awesome. Want to elaborate?
Facebook Shops, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's awesome. I mean, if you think about what I was talking about before, you got tens of millions of entities that are not plugged into an economy, okay, or not plugged into a digital economy, let's say. And you think about how you bring them on and what your value proposition is to them and what kind of commercial model that you can engage them in as an entrepreneur. What an exciting space. So we have a whole bunch of relationships with service providers, and there's a few of them in the region that are like Shopify, okay? Mm-hmm. ShopGo, eComs, Zid, a few of these types of players that essentially come to an entrepreneur and say, hey, I will help you get online. I'll help you create your page on one of these social media platforms. I will create your catalog. I will give you a payment gateway. I will connect you to a logistics provider. And ultimately, and where they're hoping to go more and more, is I will help you to scale, right? So if you've got a VC lens, okay, on who you're going to bet on these brick and mortar companies, and to bring them on, and then help bring them online and help them grow, you know, you're catching your own pass in many ways. And Facebook shops really plays into this phenomenon. It does good by these people that we want to bring into the digital fold, and it gives them the opportunity to then thrive. You can be an aggregator like a mall or like an Amazon or a Noon or an Amshi and say, hey, I'm going to go out and cast the net wide and bring in all of these entrepreneurs. I'm going to do this service. Mm-hmm. Or you can create a marketplace and do that on behalf of others, or you can go one by one. But Facebook Shops is a key enabler in this phenomenon. It is available in the region. We are scaling it in the region. We had a particular sort of San Francisco-centric logic as to which countries we start with, which I'm not terribly happy about, but you know, we have it.
So I will not ask you more.
And it will grow, and it will reach the kind of impact that I think is meaningful for this part of the world.
So this answers, apparently we're told it's still not available in Egypt. So this actually answers the next question I was going to ask you, which is not from the chat, but rather kind of thought process around tech. You know, when we take a look at the global financial crisis 12 years ago, and what kind of came from that in terms of tech, what we saw was the build out of several platforms. You know, so Uber is a platform for mobility, Airbnb is a platform for lodging, Pinterest is a platform for inspiration, right? And these were all built in 2008, 2009, right? And when you think forward or where we are now, you have kind of the real movement in certain industries, right? For us, it's education. Anything that becomes a commodity ultimately gets built into a platform. Education for us being an obvious one because content's always been the biggest bottleneck. And yet in the last 6 months, I'll bet if somebody took a look at the data, you've had more content built in 6 months than you've had in the prior 6 years, right? And as content becomes commoditized, like what do you do with it? It's super user unfriendly. Somebody has to come in and build a platform that is a proper user journey for people who wanna consume this content. And then we see a couple of other industries where we see platforms coming up. What it sounds to me Facebook Shops is effectively a platform for all of these little e-commerce, or not yet e-commerce, for all of these little juice makers or fruit sellers to really bring them into the digital age. And it's a platform for these little retailers, these mom and pops. What other industries do you see being platformized out of this revolution that's happening in tech today and due to COVID and in the workplace? Are there certain industries where you find that, you know, a year ago you may have said this is just impossible to crack and build out the fundamentals, and now the fundamentals have become commodities, and you think that they will be transformed massively? You know, I gave you education, but you know, you're clearly doing retail, so you've answered the question already. But if there's one or two others where you think that this is going to be a trend, where in 5 years, you know, things are done so differently, kind of like Uber and Airbnb.
Look, I think you know, a crystal ball moment. I suppose the natural caveat that comes with a crystal ball is that, you know, nobody guarantees anything. But you know, my sense is those industries that that have the propensity to be platformized, to use your term, are ones that are really showing us their muscle at the moment amidst the massive conversion. Is that that's Hadi? Is that Hadi in the back there?
Probably.
Other side.
There he is. I should tell him to come and say hello.
That they're showing us their muscle right now. I think the Uberization of ghost kitchens becomes a very interesting proposition, and I think it changes. It changes how we think about restaurants, and we think about innovation, and how we think about the quality of food, the experience of food, with the production of food being a very different kind of construct. Yeah. It becomes commoditized because the value add is somewhere else in the value chain. So I think that's something heading in that direction. I think the other key area, which I haven't seen much on, but I suspect will come into focus, is trade finance. Right, the ability to kind of emulate Islamic financial engagement, murabaha or musharaka, and how you expose this to the masses. Trade finance has been in this game, right? And while there's been an overemphasis on cars, I wonder what other products can come into this equation. And I think this too then becomes a platform platform for others to kind of tap into on demand. So those are two kind of top of mind. In addition, obviously, to the retail story and to the education aspect as well.
Yeah, I think there are a few others that really kind of give food for thought as well. Okay, we have 1 minute left, so maybe we do yes and no to these questions. Do you think Arab students have opportunities in terms of Facebook internship program? You can go with yes or no.
Of course, yes.
Exactly, there you go. And the last question, I haven't had the opportunity to travel in MENA much. Can you share about the climate for women in the MENA region and their role in tech? I mean, I could personally tell you that there's plenty of opportunities. We funded, so far, I think our portfolio is just over 30% female founders, which is way above the global average, and means that there's awesome women in tech. Ramez, your leadership team, women, no women, do you know? I don't want to be on the spot, but
absolutely.
What percentage female on your leadership team?
50%.
Awesome. So that answers those questions, and I think we are out of time. So just want to take a minute to say thank you very, very much for joining us and doing this tech webinar. And I will see you soon post-COVID.
I hope so. Let me take the chance to kind of also say and wish everyone who's celebrating a very wonderful Eid holiday to you and your families. And I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy wherever they may be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Eid Mubarak, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Ramez. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.